everyone. Welcome to the DK Down Under show for Roto Grinders, brought to you by Daily Fantasy Rankings. I'm Smatho 10. Right next to me is the Big Hef. Shortly, we'll go through the slate preview for Richmond and Hawthorn. But first of all, welcome to our YouTube channel at Daily Fantasy Rankings. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for future DraftKings AFL content. And also, get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. The links are in the description below. Our website is free to use for all of your AFL daily fantasy needs for DraftKings. We have full slate previews. Access our free AFL Data Tools section, which also leads to our DraftKings cheat sheets with our free projections for every player on every slate. We also have the tools regarding player scores against, correlations. It's all there at dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. And for our Roto Grinders viewers today, welcome to you all. Make sure you check out our slate preview on the Roto Grinders site. And then also for our premium subscription members, access the LineupHQ with all of our AFL DraftKings fantasy projections. Hef, we are going to break down the first game of round 3, which is the Richmond Tigers taking on the Hawthorn Hawks. Currently, Richmond are a minus 250 favourite, and the spread's 15.5 points. Hef, let's take away anything that you can look here at this particular slate. What are you looking at so far?
Well, we're looking at Richmond coming off a draw against Collingwood, whereas Hawthorn copped an absolute smacking last week against Geelong. So both teams are going to be pretty desperate. We know Richmond have been one of the best teams in the comp for the last few years. So I think they deserve their favouritism status, and I think they're going to be right on their game. So it's going to be hard for Hawthorn, but that doesn't necessarily translate to struggling to get fantasy points, because we know Richmond give up points, especially through the midfield. So we've got a bit to work with here.
DraftKings have posted a $60,000 blinder contest with $20,000 US to the winner. A $10 entry fees are all required there, and the remaining contests for this showdown slate are available on DraftKings. Let's build a core for our viewers here, Hef, and we always like to start with the position that's kind of easy to pick first up, which is the ruck position. So if you're not quite sure what a ruck is, make sure you look at our AFL Daily Fantasy stuff on Daily Fantasy Rankings. But we've only got a couple of options here, Hef, to choose. Who are you leaning in the ruck column?
Yeah, well, it's important to note that Ben McAvoy has been Hawthorn's leading ruck until this year, and now they're playing him in the back line. So it's left to John Segler for the Hawks or Ivan Soldo for Richmond. I don't think there's much between these two guys, actually. They're priced very similarly. I'm leaning to Soldo because he has only recently been given the keys to be the sole ruckman for Richmond, and he's doing a great job of it, and I think he just had the edge over Segler here.
If you look at the cheat sheet on the DFR site, we have Soldo at a projection of 71 fantasy points, and we've got Segler, where is it, at 69. So, yeah, look, it's very fair between those two. Who would you kind of lean towards? I'm leaning towards Soldo, maybe Segler. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Soldo, but both are definitely playable, and mixing and matching wouldn't be a bad option. I don't think there's going to be much between them.
All right, I'm going to plug in Segler for now just to take that salary saving. Let's move on to the forwards. And one of the tools here that we have on the Daily Fantasy Ranking site is the player scores, which can show you a breakdown of fantasy scoring against teams. And I'm showing you a screen here of the forwards through 2 rounds through the AFL. And as you can see, the Richmond Tigers are giving up the least amount of fantasy points to forwards at 35 points per player per game. Whereas you can see their Hawthorn's at 54 fantasy points per game. So that would lead me to more Richmond forwards than Hawthorn. Is there any particular forwards there from Richmond that you're looking at?
Look, I think the obvious one is Jack Higgins, who was really good last week against Collingwood, smashed his value. His price has only gone up to 4,700, so he stands out as a value option. A guy you might be looking to bounce back is the key position player for Richmond in Tom Lynch. If they get on a run and they kick goals, he's usually the beneficiary. So he is up and down, so he's more of a tournament play, but he's definitely a guy that can kick a bag when he's on.
Excellent. Well, let's plug in Jack Higgins at 4,900. Let's move on to the defence, and one of your favourite players in the whole league is playing on Thursday night. His name is Basher Hooley. 6,800 is his price tag. He actually led the Tigers in disposals last week for the Tigers. He cracked that fantasy ton, which is elusive here in the AFL. Seems to be over his injury concerns from his previous week. I want to lock him in. You going to talk me out of it, or is there any alternatives that I could look at as well?
No, that's $6,800 price tag for Hooley. He's clearly the pick of the premium defenders for me in this game. The only reason I'd look at going around him was if I wanted to trade down here, because there's plenty of value options for Richmond, and Hawthorn give up a lot of points to capitalise on that. So cheaper guys like Asprey, Grimes, even Broad, who's in there at 2,900. It gives them a chance to score reasonably well, which they don't usually get the chance to do. And if you're looking to save money, maybe avoiding Hooley and going for a couple of cheaper backs is one of your options.
The current number one valued played on the slate at the moment is David Asprey at 3,700. I'm looking at his score at 72 points last week. Would that be a ceiling score, or is that something of a role change for him?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't expect Asprey to be getting much higher than that sort of 72 figure. I think he's going to be really popular for that reason too. It's going to stand out against that $3,700 price tag. So if you're trying to get away from the obvious play, so to speak, maybe look at Dylan Grimes, $200 cheaper, coming off of 43, but he does have a ceiling around the 70s, I think. So if you're trying to get away from the crowd, he's a nice pivot.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to lock in Basher Hooley regardless into our little core lineup here. And we're going to move on to the midfield. Now, Hawthorn have a key midfielder returning from injury. His name is Jaeger O'Meara. He's currently got the P probable tag on him at the moment. He will play. The coaches and the media saying that he will play this week. The reason why we're looking at Hawthorn midfield is because the Richmond Tigers don't actually tag key players from the midfield, and they actually let midfielders from the opposing team to rack up fantasy scoring without matching instead. So I'm leaning toward Hawthorn midfielders. Would Jaeger O'Meara be one under serious consideration?
Yeah, I'm really keen to play Jaeger O'Meara. He's been missing with injury, but it was a cheekbone injury, so his fitness level shouldn't be affected from the break in play. And what we like about Richmond is they don't care what the other teams are doing. They're happy to play their own game. So if Hawthorn want to control the ball through the middle of the ground, Richmond are going to let them do so. So O'Meara, and there's even a couple of cheaper guys there who can improve getting back onto the MCG, which is a nice big wide ground. They can use the wings well, Hawthorn. So guys like Tom Scully in at 4,500, and even Ricky Henderson at 6,000, who haven't been scoring big points lately, but this is a chance for them to turn their form around.
Is there anyone at particular value from the Tigers? As you see, the salaries are not full of Hawthorn players in the premium range, so obviously there must be some Tigers players down here.
Yeah, there's the captain, Trent Cotchin, was really good last week against Collingwood. He had 86, and his price hasn't really caught up quite as much as it probably should. He's in there at 6,300, so he's definitely a value option. And then you can look at a guy like Jack Graham, who's down to 5,300, and he's a bit up and down, but he does have a ceiling. So if you're looking for a lower-owned player in a tournament, have a look at Jack Graham.
All right, finally, Hef, my lock of the week. I want to ask you for this particular slate, who you really love of this slate, if you're going to go all in on the regular player.
All in. Give me Jagger.
Excellent. And is there anyone that you don't love at all or actually hate?
Anyone that I hate? Ooh. Actually, can I throw in a sneaky while we're here?
Yeah.
Sydney Stack. Now, Sydney Stack has got awful form, but it looks like he's going to get a role change this week with Liam Baker's in doubt for Richmond. Sydney Stack might get switched from the forwards into the back line, and that might give you a little sneaky play over the rest of the field.
Excellent. I actually don't like Ben McAvoy in the rucks there. Avoid him. Roll change. Don't look at his past history. He's not doing much now with the fantasy, so I would be avoiding him regardless of his price tag.
While we're writing everyone off, I'll write one off too. Tom Mitchell, 9,000, too expensive.
Too expensive. Yep.
He's got issues with the shoulder. It's very hard to meet value at 9,000, and I'll be willing to take him on this week.
Excellent, Hef. Well, Hef, thanks for your time today. Also, a short slate here on Thursday for Richmond versus Hawthorn. Make sure you keep on the daily fantasy rankings for future videos, for future slate previews as well. I'll be joined by different guests throughout the AFL season, but you can always catch our full show on our YouTube channel. We break down the second game, the Bulldogs and the Giants, for Friday night as well. Make sure you check that out. But always get to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au for all of your AFL daily fantasy needs, and we'll catch you next time on the DK Down Under show. Hef, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, mate. See you later.
Cheers.